Welcome to Rick on Life, brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Media Project. I'm your host, Rick Amitin, and this is where we like to talk about things that are affecting our daily lives. And today we're going to be talking about stress with Dr. Jessica Borushok. Dr. Borushok is a psychologist in a supervised practice. She's an author, trainer, and an all-around self-improvement enthusiast. Originally from the States, Jessica lives in Ontario, Canada, where she works in private practice, helping those who are struggling. And she travels abroad, giving trainings to other mental health professionals throughout North America. Her newest book, Master Guide to Stress, teaches practical strategies for overcoming the chaos in everyday life. Dr. Jessica, welcome to Rick on Life.
Thank you so much, Rick. I'm so happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Listen, before we jump into your field of expertise here, I always like to give our audience a little opportunity to learn something about our guest on a personal basis. And so maybe you could share with us where you grew up and tell us about what kind of childhood you had.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in South Florida. I say Fort Lauderdale generally, but if folks are familiar with the area, I'm from Davie, which is kind of a suburb of Fort Lauderdale that maintains some of its country roots. So some of my neighbors would have horses in their front yard. I spent my summers growing up like horseback riding at a ranch down the road. I have two sisters who are much older than me, so I kind of grew up in the house as an only child, and I loved Florida. I don't like the mosquitoes and how humid it is. And then I kind of made my way up north over the years.
Great. Your childhood, was it large family, small family? Everybody get along? Was there all kinds of dysfunction? What was going on?
Well, I have kind of one of those, what we would call maybe a modern family these days. My parents got divorced when I was really young, amicable split. I grew up essentially with three parents. My dad remarried my stepmom when I was still fairly young, and so it was wonderful to grow up with, three people who are big role models to me. And then I have my two older sisters who are, they're going to kill me for saying this, but 20 and 25 years older than I am. So I have two nieces, two nephews. My youngest niece is still in high school, but the other ones are kind of off to college now and off changing the world. And other than that, it was a pretty small family. My uncle lived by. Everyone in my family lives in South Florida, except now for me and one of my sisters. So, some back and forth between my parents' house and stuff like that. But overall, a really fantastic upbringing.
Well, good. So many times we hear these horror stories, so it's always nice when somebody can say, hey, you know what? I got out of my childhood without too many scars.
Not too many bumps and bruises.
Yeah. I'm really interested in your career path.
Yeah.
And the process that you went through to decide on becoming a psychologist. And I will tell you, sometimes we get asked these questions, what would you be doing if you weren't doing what you're doing? And I actually have thought about this a lot over the years, and being a psychologist is one of the things I could have seen myself doing if I was not doing what I'm,
Yeah. Well, I could totally see that. You seem like a big people person.
Yeah, people are interesting to me. So how this happened for you? I mean, what ultimately moved you into being a psychologist?
Yeah, so once I made the decision that I wanted to go into psychology, it was a pretty straight path, but it definitely didn't start that way. To give a little background, I guess, the majority of the people in my family are doctors. My dad's a radiologist, my uncle is a pulmonary doctor, my sister's a radiologist, her husband's an ophthalmologist. So I'd originally been like, okay, pre-med, I wanted to help people. So I went to university, and that lasted maybe my first summer semester of being a biology pre-med major. Not because I couldn't handle the coursework. I decided I'd probably be a really excellent doctor, but I'd be a really unhappy doctor. Because from what I'd seen, not a lot of doctors have the opportunity to spend as much time with their clients, kind of talking with them, helping them as they wanted to. Then I'd always been really creative kind of growing up, and I switched to being actually a creative writing major, which I think now being able to write these books and put them out here kind of fulfilled a lifelong dream of mine. But I had to be a little realistic. My dad kind of sat me down and was like, well, what do you think you're going to actually end up doing with this? It was actually, I was taking a bunch of just those liberal studies requirements that you have to take, like a social studies class and things like that. And I took an intro to psychology class with, and I still remember, Professor Light. And I fell in love with psychology. I'd always been fascinated by people. I mean, people, they do the weirdest things. They're interesting. I wanted to get in their heads and understand what they were thinking and doing. Maybe that was part of my kind of creative writing background of wanting to understand the motivations of people. And he was a fantastic, inspiring professor. So I took his abnormal psychology class the next semester. And before I knew it, I was switching to be a psychology major.
You were hooked.
Yeah, absolutely. And people find their way into psychology generally in two ways. Sometimes they go, which was my path, a very direct path. I went straight from undergrad into a PhD program. I got my master's along the way. I graduated in essentially as fast as you can. Through that program, I kind of knew what I wanted. And then other people, they find their way maybe going to a master's program first, or trying other types of helping professions until they kind of find their way psychology. Yeah.
Well, great. It's always interesting to me how people choose their paths, and how it happens. You focused here on stress in your recent book.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the definition. What is the definition of stress?
Yeah, so that is an excellent question, right? It's a very kind of vague idea that people have. And I like to think of stress as essentially our reaction to a perceived threat or danger in our environment. We have an internal threat detection system. So, if I'm out hiking in the woods somewhere and I see a bear, my body is going to respond in a way, kind of that fight or flight response. It wants me to do something to protect me. Now, the problem now with stress in our day and age is that unless maybe we live out a little far, or we live in maybe a country where we're not in a really industrialized area, we're not coming across bears and lions and tigers and all of these types of things. Yeah. So now a lot of the things that activate this fight or flight, this threat detection system, often have to do with things that are happening in our social environment or perceived things that are happening. So our mind really struggles to tell the difference between a car accident that's happening right in front of us, or us thinking about, oh my God, how horrible would it be if we got into a car accident. And when we talk about stress, it's not that kind of immediate reaction where our heart starts pounding, maybe our blood is rushing to our arms and legs to get ready to run or fight. It's this chronic day in and day out anxiety, worry, fears that kind of hang over us and follow us everywhere. So it's part a physiological reaction, right? Systems are turning on and off in our bodies, our heart's pumping blood faster, but it's also the thoughts and feelings that show up inside of us also. So sometimes when people say they're feeling stressed, what they might be saying is they're feeling anxious or worried about something, or they're afraid of something happening. And so that's kind of the work that we necessarily focus on, not, the lions and tigers and bears, but more the stress that we face kind of from the grind of daily life.
Yeah, so in the practical ways, it's the strain It's the pressure that we're under and how we're perceiving whether or not we're going to, I'm phrasing this in sort of a question here. So it's sort of this feeling, are we going to make it? Are we going to survive? Are we going to see happy endings? Or is this going to kind of work out?
Absolutely. Our ancestors, hundreds of years ago, right? They were maybe, let's say, hunters or gatherers, and they would go out, their system would activate maybe when they're on the hunt or they were running away from something, and it was activating and it served a really helpful purpose. I don't want to frame stress in the sense that it's always bad. Stress can be really good, right?
Yeah.
I felt a little worried, stressed coming here today and doing an interview with you because I care about what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I want to do a good job. So stress can be helpful to us. But in our past, stress used to pop up, and then once that threat was gone, our systems would go back to being kind of relaxed, deactivated, and we could recover. It was only supposed to be like a temporary short-term experience. But now in our society, it's become, as you said, this ongoing strain. There's no relief from it anymore. And that is not using our system the way it's meant to be made.
Yeah, in my work and understanding with the DISC personality assessment profile, it seems to portray that there's some exception, but predominantly people either see the world in one of two ways. They see it as friendly or they see it as unfriendly. And I think that perception probably leads right into that internal stress of how we're seeing, is it half empty, half full, that, kind of thing. And so, and then one of the things that really I thought about when I was reading your book is often today people are claiming that they are in fear when really they're just uncomfortable. There's no real threat present. There's no real danger. But because they perceive, it could be just an idea, it could be a group of people, it could be any of these things, but their perception is this is harmful to me, and I'm in danger because of a thought or how you and it's always fascinating to me how people take the same set of facts and come away with two completely different conclusions. But I think that's the world we live in. So this stress, is it oftentimes just perception as well? Can it, or let me rephrase it, can it be as much perception as it is reality?
Yeah, so it's definitely a combination of the two. Absolutely, there are times when if we're kind of looking for danger, we're going to find it. Or if we are someone who, so evolutionarily speaking, being able to look forward and plan, or look back and say, oh, I made a mistake there. How can I make sure I avoid that mistake in the future? That's a really helpful skill to have. The problem comes when we're always doing that, right? When we're perceiving every situation that, oh, there could be danger there. Oh, this person doesn't like me. And we're starting to put our own ideas or perceptions on what's happening in reality. And then reality can be stressful. In today's day and age, where people are holding multiple roles, when in order to survive, a lot of houses have two-income families, where our kids are playing soccer and piano and chess club, and we're running all over the place, where our email and phone follow us everywhere we go, where we're kind of waiting, oh my God, are we going to get an email from our boss on Sunday night telling us we have to give a presentation the next morning? It's a combination of the two. There are things in our environment that are stressful, and then there are the ways that we perceive our environment and perceive how much control we have over those situations. When we feel really helpless or like things won't change, that just kind of ramps up that stress.
Yeah, I think most things in life, without some assistance or training, most of us are ill-equipped to recognize and deal with something like stress. So how should the average person recognize that they're under stress, and how should they begin to navigate that? What's the way forward?
Absolutely. So I like to look at a couple of different things when I'm trying to get an idea of if someone's feeling maybe very stressed. One is the type of thoughts that we're having. So if you find yourself constantly worrying, constantly thinking through things, you're laying in bed before you go to sleep and your mind's racing with all the things you have to do tomorrow. You wake up in the morning and your first thought is, oh, I have to, go into the office and do all of these things. The way that we're thinking, if we're constantly focusing on threats that could come up, on things that make us feel stressed out or anxious, that's kind of one clue. Another clue is how we're feeling. So sometimes people won't be able to identify stress. Maybe they feel anxious. For a lot of men, they'll notice feeling angry or irritable because essentially stress kind of wears down our ability to be patient, to handle all the things that life throws at us. So they might notice feeling more irritable. In terms of physiologically, our heart might be pounding a little bit faster. We might get that feeling like someone's gripping our throat and we can't breathe, or like there's a big weight on our chest. Maybe we feel shortness of breath, or we feel this sense of like restlessness, like there's a million little zips of energy running through our body. And then we might be able to notice stress by the things that we're doing. So we might notice that we are constantly saying yes to things, that we find ourselves needing to pace back and forth. A lot of folks, when they're feeling very overwhelmed or stressed, they might have difficulty not doing anything. So if you find yourself kind of slowing down and all of a sudden starting to get uncomfortable, like, oh no, I need to go clean the house, or I need to do this or do that, those all might be clues that you're starting to kind of get worn down and get towards a burnout phase. And it's different for everyone. There might be a different combination of all of those things. And it depends how insightful a person is. So oftentimes when I am working with people who are experiencing stress that maybe don't have a ton of insight, they might notice more the physical sensations that they experience, like their heart pounding or stomach aches and things like that.
So it shows up in even physical ways.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone begins to feel or notice or become aware that these things are going on, what, short of saying, I need some professional help here, I mean, what can they be doing to
Absolutely. So one of the issues is that oftentimes we end up kind of doing Band-Aid solutions, right? Where we sometimes do things like pick fights with our partners, we work a lot, we procrastinate, we spend the day sleeping all day long. We do a lot of these things that feel good in the short term, but in the long term aren't helping us. And so, for example, my book goes through a lot of practical skills, but what's more important is that we don't want to just jump to, well, let's take a deep breath, right? We also want to look at the patterns that led us to stress in the first place. We don't want to slap Band-Aid solutions on things because those are only going to last for so long.
Right.
So when you start noticing yourself feeling stressed and overwhelmed, taking a step back and looking at your life and saying, what am I doing? Like, what is important to me in my life? Like the who and the what that matters most to me. And then what am I actually spending my time doing? And what we usually find is that when people are feeling really stressed, these two things look very different. Maybe reading is really important to us, or travel, or family time, but we're spending all of our time in the office. And being able to slow down and notice some of these patterns. And then notice, when I get stressed, what do I do next? So we are driven by things that make us feel good. All species are, right? You have a bunny rabbit, they want to spend time with other bunnies and eat some carrots. And they want to avoid that barking dog and the angry farmer with a pitchfork. And so we want to make sure that the reactions that we have to stress are ones that are serving our long-term goals rather than our short-term goals. And what I mean by that is when I said people pick fights with their partner, for example, or procrastinate, those are things that help us escape that feeling of stress in the short term, but in the long term are just making more problems for us. And so if we can stop and take a step back and slow down and notice, okay, what do I want to be about in this moment? I'm feeling really stressed out. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Maybe I'm feeling irritable and I want to lash out because it kind of feels a little bit good just to deflect the energy away from me. And slowing down and saying, well, what's really going on? What do I want to be about in this moment? So I would say the first thing for people to do is slow down and just notice what's happening. Because I imagine if you're experiencing a pounding heart or you got a stomach ache, there's some other things that are going on as well. And if we can become better at noticing the symptoms of stress, then we can become better at interrupting and taking back control. So first it's recognizing these patterns and slowing down, and then it might be making some changes in your life. Not saying yes to things as much, having difficult conversations with family members about maybe setting boundaries. Maybe it's deciding not to check my email after 10 o'clock at night, which I still struggle with.
Yeah.
So it's making some of these changes. And then in the moment, what we can do, I'm a big proponent of mindfulness. And when I say that, I don't mean like an close your mind, clear your mind kind of thing. Really this idea of slowing down and noticing. So maybe it's just following your breath for a moment. Maybe when we pause and we just notice our breath, we notice like, I've kind of been holding my breath for a little while. So all of these little things, these little skills that are helpful, but they're not going to help as much as understanding what are these patterns that we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah, I want to come back to this mindfulness in just a minute, but
Yeah.
I want to hit on something that you brought up a minute ago, and that was about learning to control our thoughts and our feelings. And I am a big proponent in positive thinking. I think it has great attributes. I try to be very optimistic, and I think that I have over the years proven that has benefits.
Yeah.
But there's also this line that seems to be there when we get into the controlling aspect of it, we can, which we can't always do.
Yep.
And so if you're really hearing this all the time, oh, change your thoughts, change your world, just think and grow rich, and all of the buzz phrases that are out there that very few people seem to really be able to use to propel them forward. And so when we fail at control, then we can start experiencing guilt, and when that's left there unattended for a period of time, it can become shame, and now you got a whole nother issue to be dealing with. So I read this section in the book that you were talking about this control, and so I wanted to go back to that and talk to us about this fallacy of control.
Yeah, so a large portion of our culture, as well as a lot of the prominent therapies out in the world today, focus on this idea that, well, we have a thought and it's maybe out of line with what's happening in our environment, right? And so we just need to create a more balanced thought. The problem with that is that, yeah, you could have a more balanced thought. So for example, you could be in a really stressful situation. You might be thinking, oh no, I can't get all of this done. And you pause and you're like, you know what? I'm doing a pretty awesome job. I can do this, right? And that's wonderful. And that can maybe propel you to do a good job. But it doesn't mean that this other thought went away. And like, even in this moment, if I pointed at you and I said, be happy right now, right? That would be ridiculous. Or if it's going to sound a little violent, but if I took a pen and stabbed it into your hand and I said, don't feel pain, we would think that's ridiculous or crazy or a parlor trick. And so this idea then that we just tell people, well, don't be sad. Don't be stressed. Just get over it. It's not a big deal, is extremely invalidating. And if we actually stop and look at our own experience, the way that growth happens is not by not feeling a certain way. It's not by not getting rid of a painful thought. It's about what we do when that thought shows up. So you are exactly right. If I have this mentality that I have to change my thoughts, and then I can't, because we really don't have the ability to stop ourselves from thinking a certain way, then we're then going to feel like a failure, and it just keeps piling on. And the same thing happens when stress shows up. Stress shows up, we try to get rid of this feeling of stress, maybe through distraction, avoidance, and it goes away for a little bit, but that stress always comes back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I don't want to leave with this impression that, well, you're just kind of screwed. You're going to have these bad thoughts, and that just happens. But it's more this idea of what we do when these thoughts show up. If we spend all of our life trying to control, wrestle, change, fight with ourselves, over time, that's just going to build and build and build until we're trapped in a cage where our life is very small. So instead, thinking about, well, what is important to me in this moment? Recognizing and acknowledging, I'm scared right now, or I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I'm taking care of my parents who are sick, or I have young kids, and it's hard. Acknowledging that, and then deciding, well, what do I want to be about in this moment? For you, I imagine with this positive thinking, you might have a thought pop up that's very self-defeating, or you're feeling very overwhelmed. And you might pause and say, okay, I'm feeling really stressed out. And this is really important to me. I want to spread the message with my book. I want to create this show that can help other people. And I'm doing it, even if it's hard. And then you sit down and you email another person, or you meet with someone for a show, and you're constantly moving forward. And don't take my word for it. I would urge everyone who's listening to this to say, are the thoughts that I have in my life, do they ever permanently go away? I imagine the stuff that really gets you is the stuff that's been there maybe even since childhood. And so our efforts to try to control it and hide from it isn't really working in the long term.
Yeah, we all have a story,
Mm-hmm.
and our stories matter. And I think the people that I have dealt with over the years, and I've seen it in my own life,
Yeah.
that the ones that are having the most struggles are the ones that are wrapped up in elements of their story
Mm-hmm.
that aren't authentic.
Yeah.
They haven't been able to separate the fact from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But what I mean by that is when the fact of what happened is real. Somebody violated you, for instance.
Absolutely.
But the truth of that is not that you were diminished.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they didn't see your value. You have to see your own value.
Absolutely.
So, it's in being able, I think, to embrace all of your emotions and all of your thoughts. And I look for harmony. And because I think the minute you get out of balance, stress really shows up in big ways and other things as well.
And I would say harmony. I love that word. I would say harmony is acknowledging that there's pain in life, and there's pain in life because we care about things. So being, let's say, in a mentally abusive or verbally abusive relationship, being abandoned by someone, all of those things hurt because connection and relationships are important to us. And so I think of that harmony as acknowledging that, like, yeah, the fact this terrible thing happened, and it's still important to me to make connections with people, or it's still important to me to move forward, even though this bad thing happened.
Well, it appears to me, after all these years, that you would know better from a formal clinical standpoint. But I think life is a delicate balance of tensions.
Yeah.
And you have highs and lows. You have an ebb and flow, and good things come, and you've got to deal with things that you don't want. And our intuition is very valuable to us, but it's not always just leading us to the mountaintop. Sometimes you have to be aware that even though that door's open, don't walk through it.
Yeah.
And so that may not be the, the thought that you want, but learning to trust your instincts and all of these things are there to work for our good.
Yeah.
And when they get out of balance, it appears to me that it's because we're out of harmony and we're out of balance, and we're not seeing something correctly.
And we're losing sight of what really matters. The way that when we get kind of trapped in that really terrible space, it's because we are trapped in our head, maybe trying not to think through something, trying not to feel something. And the way we get through those dips and valleys is, I like to think about, clinically, we would call these values, but it's essentially the who and the what that matters to us. The qualities or characteristics that we want to be about, right? I want to be a person who's loyal or hardworking, or someone that is respectful of others, for example. And if we can hold true to what those things are that are important to us and be intentional about it. In today's day and age, if we just go with the flow, we're going to end up in a really dark place.
Yeah.
Life is stressful and bad things happen. Yeah. And it is on us to be very intentional about what we choose to do next with our life. And the way we get through those bad moments is staying committed to the type of life that we want to have. And it allows us to keep moving forward.
Yeah, in reading your book, it's such a straightforward approach. It's written in a very digestible format. I think it's very user-friendly. And I think it meets your goal to put a valuable resource in the hands of average people who are just living their lives every day, and this is going to help them. But one of the things that you did remind me of is when I read this chapter in your book, and then you mentioned it earlier, but it's mindfulness and meditation, and people have all kinds of ideas about what that means.
Yeah.
But take a moment, please, and elaborate on the practice and the benefits of mindfulness and meditation. My mind is always full, but that's not mindfulness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I titled that chapter "Mindfulness for Those Who Aren't Mindful," because there's a lot of folks who have preconceived notions about what mindfulness and meditation is. Maybe they think that you have to be seated with your legs crossed. Maybe you have to listen to certain kinds of music. Maybe it means you have to clear your mind. And for someone who feels very overwhelmed and stressed, that just doesn't seem possible. And so when I say mindfulness, what I mean, and it's a very simple definition, is paying attention. So it used to be the case that definitions of mindfulness were more complex. It was paying attention on purpose in a non-judgmental way. And the truth is, we can't necessarily be non-judgmental about stuff. Our minds are popping up with all of these ideas. Yeah. And this idea of having a quiet mind, this came from a lot of Eastern meditation practices. But when you talk to people who are lifelong practitioners, what they talk about when they reach that peaceful, slow space is not that there aren't thoughts in their mind, not that they don't experience pain, but that they're able to notice it, and detached is maybe the wrong word, but noticing it kind of as it is not who I am. Like, I am the person who is noticing my thoughts, or I am the person who is noticing, I have an itch on my arm, or my stomach's grumbly because I'm hungry. And so with my goal with mindfulness, just as I talked about earlier of understanding patterns, is we want to cultivate this practice of being present in the here and now, which is frankly the only place we have that we can influence. Right. We can plan for future things, we can go back in time in our minds, but right here, right now is the only time that we have any influence over. And so bringing ourselves back to the present moment and noticing what's happening. That could be what's happening inside of our bodies, right? Maybe getting a little more awareness around stress symptoms that we experience. Or sometimes when we get really caught in our minds, we miss all these beautiful moments that are happening around us. Maybe spending time with our family is really important to us, but we're out to dinner And our mind is racing through, I have to do this next, and work is busy, and oh, the kids are sick, all of these types of things. And we're
Yeah.
missing how good the food tastes. We're missing the funny story that our parents are telling. We're missing the joy on our parents' face when they play with their grandkids. We're missing all of these beautiful moments that make up life. And mindlessness, so not paying attention, is not a bad state. I love daydreaming. I love, planning and being organized, but we don't want our whole experience to be that, because our mind is trained to focus on problems and find threats. And if we're going through life without any intention, without being mindful, then our mind will filter for all of those things. And it could be very easy to get overwhelmed. So if we can take a step back and be intentional about just noticing what's happening in our environment, being present.
Yeah, when you
enjoying
can
the
slow
moment.
yourself down, even just 15, 20 minutes, and really find that space, where it is almost like an observance of your life. And I still work hard at this. It doesn't come natural or easy for me. I'm definitely a man in motion, and so it's hard to to do that. But I can tell you, when I don't do it, and for over a short period of time, it really shows up, and
Absolutely.
I realize, okay, I'm tilting. I gotta get back upright. We, as human beings, I agree with that. I love the statement that by nature we're problem solvers. But I also find that so many of us are really good at excuses. And so this is kind of my version of what came first, the chicken or the egg question here. Are we stressed because we're making excuses, or are we making excuses because we're stressed?
So that is an excellent question. I would maybe take a step back and break it down a little bit, in that I think, so when we talk about excuses, we might talk about coming up with reasons why we didn't chase that promotion, or why we didn't go on that second date, or why we're not chasing our dream of being an author, right? We come up with reasons why we can't do things. And oftentimes that's in relation to not necessarily stress, but an uncomfortable feeling that we have inside of us. So, and it's generally tied to something that's important to us. So for example, while I was writing this book, there was a lot of procrastination that happened, right? Oh, well, I was seeing a lot of clients and I was tired at the end of the day. Oh, don't I deserve just to sleep in this morning? And I would come up with a lot of reasons why I could just push back working on the book a little bit. And it was in response, when I really took a step back, it wasn't necessarily stress that I was reacting to, but I was reacting to this feeling of nervousness. Writing this book meant a lot to me. I really want to be able to put out things that help people and express myself in a clear, kind of practical way. And maybe I was reacting to this thought of, oh, it's going to be a terrible book and everyone's going to hate it. And so I reacted. I didn't want to experience that thought or feeling. So I came up with a reason, a very practical reason. I call it productive procrastination, of why I couldn't do something in that moment. Also, we experience sometimes a lot of emotions that are very unpleasant. So maybe I was just feeling really exhausted. I saw 7 clients yesterday, and I come home and I'm tired, and I don't want to experience the effort it takes to try to do something that's important to me. So I say, instead of going to the gym today, I'm going to lay on the couch because I had a hard day and I deserve it. But generally, I would say this idea of excuses comes in response to an unwillingness on our part to not want to experience something that's unpleasant. So whether it's stress, anxiety, fear, whether it's just like fatigue, folks with chronic pain, for example, might not go out and do something because they don't want to experience, they're trying to avoid more pain. So not just stress, but we come up with excuses for things oftentimes because we're trying to escape or avoid something that feels really unpleasant.
Yeah, there's something really, really powerful about what you spoke to earlier, and that is the difference between the short-term, long-term effect.
Yeah.
I've gone into this new year wanting to be healthier
Mm-hmm.
and making some significant changes there. And so I tend to it's not cakes and it's not pies but chocolate candy
Oh.
is an issue for me. We get along so well that it's hard for me to dismiss them and make my candy bars feel like I don't want them or I don't love them. Oh, but if I comfort myself with that candy bar, I'm really upset with myself because it doesn't fit the long term of what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easy, like you say, you're feeling. Just reward yourself. You've had a good day or you've had a bad day. Give yourself a candy bar, and you really have to look at what you want and what you said earlier, what really matters. And I think we do this with excuses from every direction, and I think it just becomes habit that has to be altered.
And that's where this idea of mindfulness comes in, right? Because if we aren't aware that I'm reaching for this candy bar because I'm feeling really tired, or I had a stressful day and I know that this thing will make me feel better. For me, it's pizza. This candy bar will make me feel better. If we don't have that, if we aren't able to slow things down and recognize I'm eating this candy bar, not because I want something that's delicious, but because it's either creating a positive feeling in me or it's helping me escape an unpleasant feeling, then we don't necessarily get to choose what we do next. That urge or craving gets to choose. So if we can be mindful and slow down and recognize, so Rick, not to get too personal, but why is it important that you are healthy?
Well, first off, I still have a lot that I want to do, and
Mm-hmm.
my family still needs me at this point, and I have this 9-year-old grandson that he doesn't have his dad in his life, and so I'm fulfilling a kind of a dual role in that regard. And this is all very important to me. And I did suffer a heart attack a year ago, and so it's like I've known for an extended period of time that I needed to make changes.
Yeah.
And so the wake up call comes when you don't pay attention to the good things in your life. Mm-hmm. And so it gives you an opportunity to say, whoa, got to wake up.
And maybe thinking about not being there for your grandson can be too painful. And so we want to not think about that. But if we don't, if every time you go to reach for a candy bar, you don't pause and say, is this working towards my goal of getting to see him graduate high school? Getting to help provide mentorship and guidance as he goes out into the world. If you are willing to experience that discomfort, then it makes it easier to turn down that candy bar, even though
absolutely. I threw myself under the bus because I don't like to use other people as examples for things like that. But for me, it's something that I really did have to address because I just became addicted to sugar, and it's something I just have to put the brakes on and say, and the mindfulness helps with all of that so much, and slowing down and breathing and feeling your breath and pausing, making everything. And I've gotten pretty good at it because I've actually felt like I was observing myself eating that candy bar and pampering myself and watching myself do it. No. This is not what we're supposed to be doing here.
And the goal is not that you can never have a candy bar again.
Exactly.
It's just that you're making an intentional decision that, like, I'm going to have this candy bar, and maybe instead of scarfing it down because I feel a little shame for eating it, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to love every single bite of that candy bar. I'm just not going to have it every day.
Yeah, if you wait a week, you can really savor it. I'm proving that. If you wait a week, you can really, really savor it.
Yeah, I get pizza once a month, and it is a delicious experience, and I do not share with anyone.
Yeah, that's certain things I'm going to do. I just have to do it in moderation, make it work. I love this statement. This is my favorite statement in your book so far, and I have, a couple more chapters to go, but this is my favorite statement so far, and I agree with it so much. So when I read it, it was just perfect, and I loved it, and I want to highlight it. But you said sometimes, not always, but sometimes we use responsibility as a way to avoid our lives. And as we're getting close here to wrapping up the show, I just wanted you to touch on that. That is so true, and it's so powerful. And I think we all need to be aware of this particular big one. This is a big one to me.
Well, it's the same. Well, first of all, thank you. But it's the same as that discussion of short-term versus long-term. It feels good to do things for other people. It feels good to receive praise and feel like we're the only one that can tackle a situation. It feels good to have someone turn to us and want us to help with something. But there comes a point where we need to pause and recognize that we can't shoulder every responsibility. And we need to decide on an individual, case-by-case basis of what is important to me in this moment.
Yeah.
And it can be difficult to take time for ourselves or to say no. It might even feel very selfish. And that's a feeling that we don't like having. And so if we're going in the short term, we can oftentimes distract ourselves by helping other people. And it's very reinforcing. We get praise. Oh, you're such a good, daughter. Oh, you're such a good grandpa. You're a wonderful coworker. And you get all of this praise. But really, it can sometimes be a way to avoid focusing on ourselves and what's important to us, right? We keep ourselves so busy with, I have to do all of these other things for other people. I can't possibly take time for myself. And we kind of put blinders on. And I think you have a right to focus on yourself. And there are times when there are responsibilities that are in line with what's important to us. But there are also times when we need to have difficult conversations with ourselves and with people in our world to say, I really want to help you, but I can't do this right now. Or not wanting to maybe enable certain behaviors. Or just being able to say, I can't say yes to everything. I can't keep this going for the long term, nor should I have to.
Yeah, it really does take some commitment to what's important and what really matters, and making some decisions, about what you're going to do with your life, because we all know that activity is not productivity, and so you can be very busy and not really accomplishing, a lot of things. And if you're trying to avoid things that that you need to pay attention to in your life by saying, I'm just so busy, I can't do it. And then the praise that you do get reinforces that position, because people like you to do things for them. And so most of them will affirm that. And so if you're not careful, you've just kind of lost yourself over into this place when you can't be happy, because internally you're not connected.
Yeah.
And you realize, I'm missing something here.
Yeah. And that's not to say that we can't ever help people, but we want to make sure that we're doing it that's in line with the type of life that we want to have and what's important to us.
Yeah.
That we're not using it as a way to avoid, as you beautifully said, avoid the stuff that's going on inside of us.
Yeah. I think the extreme of that is the people that you see as martyrs. They're just sacrificing themselves for everybody else, and
Mhm.
and take no responsibility for their own life and their own
Yeah.
path. And so, yeah, there's so much to talk about, and I'm having such a good time talking with you, and it would be so fun to explore all of this. But this is why you're creating the materials and all of that. And so your mission to make needed resources available for people at affordable prices,
Mhm.
tell us, it falls in line with the website that you have created. So tell us a little bit about what people will experience when they go to your website at yourpsychology.ca.
Yeah, absolutely. So this all started going into private practice. There are a lot of people that I see who benefit from coming in talking with someone with therapy, but there are a lot of people out there who either can't access those resources, feel uncomfortable because of stigma of going to talk to someone, or maybe don't need to go into therapy, but could use some practical and science-driven advice. There's a lot of quick fixes and
Yeah.
fads around about how best to tackle stress or help your life. And I wanted to provide something not only to my clients, but just everyone out there who's looking to make a difference in their lives, to make small changes that can have a big impact. Not having to buy a $200 course or go to a $5,000 retreat or something like that, something that they could take with them and make these small changes. So I created yourpsychology.ca and in my book, The Master Guide to Stress, as a way to provide low cost resources. So on my website, I have a blog. I have, if you subscribe, which is for free, just being part of my mailing list, and I don't spam people that often, you get access to mindfulness downloadable MP3s, so you can follow along with different mindfulness exercises. I have worksheets to help track behaviors or figure out what those patterns are that you find yourself stuck in. I also, so Master Guide to Stress is the first book in what I hope is to be a series. And I've really gone through and identified, well, what are problems that everyone faces or a large percentage of people face that they might not seek treatment for, but they're looking for practical, evidence-based stuff. So my next book is going to be Master Guide to Insomnia, and then I'm going to be doing a book on meditation and another book on kind of diet and exercise, creating that healthy lifestyle. And in addition to the books, I also am hoping to create online courses, because I know sometimes people, if English maybe is their second language, or they're just not someone who enjoys kind of reading through a book, creating an online course that would only be about $10. So again, creating low-cost resources to help as many people as possible.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've gone and gone at the website myself. Also, the book, Your Master Guide to Stress, is available on Amazon, and the digital version is $2.99. So, I mean, you can't get it wrong. And I encourage everybody to get the book. There isn't anybody at any level, I think, who won't benefit at some point with the book. It's just very practical. And I think everybody can take advantage of that. So, Dr. Jessica Borushok, thank you for being with us today. It's been great talking with you. I wish you only love and happiness. And to our viewers, thanks for watching and being here. And remember, whatever's going on in your life, just sprinkle a little love on it. I'm Rick Amitin, and I'll see you next time.